Hello, everyone. It sounds like everyone's enjoying their lunch, which is all we can hope for. So please keep eating. We're going to talk over you. I'm not going to ask you to respond with hoots because I know we're all chewing our food right now. But at least we can do a clap. How was the first round of concurrent sessions? Is everyone meeting new people, connecting, feeling a little bit more inspired? There's head nods, I can see that. All right. So our next plenary session is gonna bring back two folks that we've already met. I've already introduced these speakers this morning, but I really think that storytelling is so important in our space. If you asked us 10 years ago if we could have filled a room like this just to talk about youth homelessness, we would have fallen off our chairs if we knew that this is what it could be. And I think the connections that we build here, we don't realize how long-lasting they can be. So I preface this just for our next speakers. We've met Jayne, and we've met Steve this morning. But I think we should talk about how did Jayne and Steve meet? So in the 11th hour yesterday, I was finding our plenary speakers and asking for anecdotes. Tell me something, so I can tell this crowd that we're all friends here. And so once upon a time, a long time ago, Jayne was a master's student, not really sold on academia, not really sold on this track. And Steve walks into Jayne's class. And Steve says, I don't really like academia, I like punk rock. And I've heard other intros this morning from other scientists that say, actually, all you need to know about me is the music that I like, and maybe that I have a couple kids. And I really like the personal aspect of getting to know each other, because when we think about academia, we think about a hierarchy. We think about that it's only reserved for the learned, for these folks, and not those folks. So really trying to humanize that today. So all that happened is Jayne felt re-inspired by Steve and said, oh, I guess I also don't need to love academia to try it out. I can be punk in this space. And like I said, one of Jayne's areas of research is anarchy. So really, you can be yourself even as a researcher. So for our next plenary session, I'm going to invite Steve and Jayne to have a conversation where we flip the tables on the professor and the professor so they can talk to each other. Let's give them a round of applause.
How are you doing, Steve?
Good, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I just went to a great panel about youth homelessness prevention in schools.
That sounds really good.
Right?
Was it packed?
It was packed.
I guess.
Standing room only.
All right.
How are folks doing? You're eating. You don't want to talk to each other. You want to listen to us talk.
That's right, and it's too late to get a second helping of ravioli.
Yeah. You'll
You'll just have to wait till tomorrow.
Fight for it. Should we talk or maybe make like calming ocean noises while you eat lunch? No, we're gonna chat. So thank you, Marty, for this introduction. It is true that I almost quit academia and then I met Steve and got to work at the COH during my master's. And so I'm really excited to get to grill you with questions about your work. For folks who might not have been here this morning, my name is Jayne Malenfant. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm now an assistant professor at McGill University in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. And as I did this morning, I'm going to ask Steve to introduce himself and tell us a bit about where you do your work and what kind of work you do.
Okay, so I'm Steve Gaetz. I'm a professor at York University in Toronto, which is over there somewhere, I think. I'm pointing the wrong way. And so, yeah, I've been interested in research on homelessness since I used to work in the sector years ago. And so at that time, there were hardly anybody doing that kind of research. And there was a pushback on research. People would say, we don't need research. We know what the problem is. We know what the solution is. And I thought, wrong, wrong, wrong. Of course we need research, but we need it to be useful. So that's what I've been dedicating my career to.
Can you, I'm sure many people here know who you are and where you work, but can you tell folks what your official role is?
Oh, my official role. Okay, so so I lead the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness. And I co-lead Making the Shift with Melanie Redmond of Away Home Canada.
Oh,
Oh, there, over there, okay. And so both of those vehicles are to engage in partnerships, always in partnership, to conduct and then mobilize research to have an impact on solutions to homelessness. So that's kind of the work. The focus on youth homelessness is really strong, and the reasons why will come through in some of the stories,
great.
I'm thinking.
I hope so. Thank you, Steve. So, yeah, I asked a similar question to the panelists this morning, but can you talk about how you enter this work, maybe philosophically, but also just how you got started doing this? What drew you to the topic of youth homelessness, and what experiences shape where you're at now?
You want me to go way back, don't you?
Go back.
Right, okay, so it was mentioned about punk rock. So when I was a teenager, it was the first wave of punk rock, like the Sex Pistols, the Clash, that kind of thing. Me and my friends got into that. And it was at school, people thought we were freaks. And adults would be like reading the headlines going, well, that's awfully violent stuff and that kind of stuff. And, but to me it made being a teenager possible and livable and pleasurable and all of that. And so when I eventually went to university, I was in an anthropology course at University of Calgary. Yay, Calgary. There we go. And,
at least one person loves Calgary.
And so we're building momentum in that area. So anyway, I was in this anthropology course, and I said, I want to do my paper on punk and the punk scene in Calgary. And the professor said, yeah, that sounds great. And my jaw just about hit the floor. I thought, you mean at university I can write about punk? And I thought, wow, this is like incredible. It like changed everything. I went and majored in anthropology. But it also gave me like a vision for the work I wanted to do, which is recognizing that a lot of things that adults are suspicious of around things that young people do are the very things that allow that young person to get through the day. And so I then wanted to work with young people. And so I did, more work on the punk stuff, but wound up in Ireland working with young people who were like very marginalized and everyone was afraid of, but were the funniest group of people in the whole world. And then I did my PhD on that, and then ran screaming from academia because I thought I don't want any part of this. And worked at Shout Clinic in Toronto, which was a community health center for young people experiencing homelessness. Was able to do research while we were there. And then eventually worked for the city of Toronto. And between those two things, by the way, that was like doing a second PhD. I learned what made the sector tick. I learned how government works. And so I came back to York, and then it all went from there. Mm-hmm. There you go.
Very cool. And so can you talk a little bit more about what it was like kind of leaving an academic degree and working in a youth serving organization and doing research there? Like, what did your day-to-day learnings look like in that space?
Well, first of all, it took a long time to get a job.
Right. I remember that resonating with me when I met you.
But I got hired as a health promoter, which I had no idea what that was. So I went and researched it at the library and then went for an interview. And the good news is the people doing the hiring didn't really know what that was either, health promotion. So anyway, with that job, I did a lot of street outreach. I did programs with young people to develop health promotion materials, set up a dental clinic. Mm-hmm. And so if any of you want advice on how to set up a dental clinic, talk to me.
Teeth are important.
And then how to do fundraising for that, and how to do management. And so I picked up this whole range of skills that actually were very useful in the further work I did, but also was able to do the research that at that time was about how young people make money because the province was getting ready and in fact did put in legislation to criminalize homelessness. And so it all went from there. But at that time it was tough because in the sector there was an anti-intellectualism. People didn't see the value of research, as I said before. So coming to York was a chance to make what I said then, make research matter. Make it so that people go, oh, this is actually helpful.
Mm-hmm. Like demonstrate that it can be useful for people.
That's right.
I would like to talk about prevention.
Right.
Are people down for that? Yeah. Over your raviolis. So can you also share, because it's been pointed out by Marty that you're older than us, perhaps, sorry. That you've been, working in this field since Marty was a baby? No, not born. So in your years and wisdom, Steve, how have you seen prevention become something that was on the radar? What have you seen in terms of making the shift towards prevention?
Yeah,
Can you talk a bit about how that came up and what it's looked like?
Yeah, my first 10, 15 years at York, I got interested in the prevention of homelessness around 2008. And to be honest, in Canada and the United States at the policy level, it was a non-starter. It was like, no, we have to house all the chronically homeless people first, and then maybe we'll get around to that. Youth homelessness was also not a priority at all. And so we're starting from zero, right? And people, it not only was it not a priority, people railed against it. They just saw it as a distraction. And there are still people out there who think that way. And I'll just leave that. But I remember going to a conference in Calgary. I was living in Toronto at that time. And is Alina around? But anyway, I developed this, I was thinking like, how do we explain what to do about homelessness? And it was like, so I made this diagram where it's like, you can prevent it, you can have an emergency response and you'll need that, and you can help people exit homelessness. And ideally, you should be doing all of those things. But the reality is the bulk of the effort investment, and this true to this day, is in the middle part, the emergency services, which are important, and then, with Housing First, moved a little bit in the direction of helping people exit. But prevention was just not on the radar. So when we started all this work, when Melanie Redmond kind of arrived on the scene sideways, coming from different, she kind of flew in sideways like this. That was a game changer because you came from a background around policy and disability, and you had all these questions. Like you were like, I just don't understand, why this isn't a way to approach it. And so that started off conversation. I remember we were like, well, we should start a national movement on this thing, and so worked. And the great thing about that was that partnership is what made all of this possible. A researcher-led organization, and the Observatory does great stuff, but could not achieve the same things, right? So with Away Home Canada and its connection to the national learning community on youth homelessness and that connection to the sector, the experience around government relations, all of those things create like a great, integrated system on its own. And so that's when things really took off. And we started to get more funding to do research, and we're doing, research on like the Without a Home study, things like that. Started to go to the United States, to Washington State, and Washington, D.C. And started to meet people who were like thinking differently as well. And so the momentum built, and we started to do more things, the demonstration projects around 2017. At that time, it was still, at the political level, no one was talking about prevention in Canada. In the US, a tiny bit, like around under Obama, but not full on. And here we are now in 2025, and you've seen the The government of Canada has taken up prevention, not as fully as we would like. And I know there are people from government of Canada in the room, but they'll know what I mean. But at least it's there, and it's moving in that direction. These things take time. In the United States, you've seen developments at the state level in many places where there's lots of progressive work. But you had the USICH released a strategic plan on homelessness prevention, right? So like it's a different world. And so I think in a lot of places it's still at the conceptual stage. It's not fully operationalized, but that's the next step. And for us, in our work, that's going to be the body of work, right? Is the mobilizing the knowledge that's been created. You know, with Making the Shift, we funded like 39 different research projects across Canada. You know, and a lot of the people who did that are in this room now.
Hey.
Put up your hand if you did a Making the Shift research project. Melanie's got her hand
At least
up.
12
That's
of
kind of,
them.
yeah, look over, there's a lot of people over there. So,
Right.
so anyway, that's a big deal. Like that's a huge, you know, investment in the creation of very helpful knowledge, useful knowledge. And then our demonstration projects on Housing First for Youth and Upstream and Family Natural Supports and Reconnect, you know, like we went into these demonstration projects to like provide funding for organizations to deliver the service while we studied them. And let me tell you, from a research perspective, that's a big risk. Because like, what if we studied Housing First for Youth and found out that, it doesn't really make a difference? Or, you know, like we didn't know, we had the conviction that we believed in these things, but we didn't know if the evidence would back up what we believed to be happening. And the good news is that the research shows very positive outcomes for all of these interventions. So that's very exciting.
Nice. Great. I mean, I think that's it. Research that is functioning in service of community and in service of the work that's already happening has a purpose regardless of what comes out of it, but you can also know these things.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. For folks, there's folks here who did Making the Shift funded projects. Can you raise your hand if you're doing youth homelessness prevention work broadly? Oh, at least 12 people are doing youth homelessness prevention.
Whew.
I thought at a youth homelessness prevention conference there would be way more hands up right now. But okay, that's fine. I believe in you, that you all are. So this is a question I'm sure we'll all be talking about a lot over the next couple of days, but from your perspective, what are some particular challenges you see in getting folks to understand and implement youth homelessness prevention, other than the 12 people who put up their hands, maybe?
Well, we're learning some things about people valuing prevention in Canada. So for instance, for a long time, my goal and our goal was to get people to care about prevention, and in particular care about the prevention of youth homelessness. We wanted that. And it was slow uptake, and then a couple of years ago we did this survey within the homelessness sector in Canada. Had 150 different service providers fill out this survey where we had a bunch of questions about prevention and their knowledge and understanding of things. And over 90% said that they believe that we can't solve youth homelessness without prevention. And I was blown away. I thought, because I was like, I'm going to spend the rest of my life convincing people to do prevention. But the sector's kind of moved into that space of openness to it. But there are challenges, and I'm going to talk about this tomorrow in a presentation with Heidi, is that taking things to scale is really tough. Right, and the people in that survey mentioned some of the barriers. So they mentioned that the communities were not always in favor or interested in youth homelessness prevention is one thing. They felt that they needed help to switch over, is another. They said they need dedicated funding to do this work because otherwise there's an opportunity cost. If you're going to do prevention, you have to stop doing something else. and they need training and technical assistance. So to answer your question, like the sector has said clearly, like some of the things that get in the way of them making the shift, right? And so we need to work on that, right? So, you know, we haven't got there in terms of having all of those things addressed, but we're getting there a lot. Like, I think our knowledge and ability to do training and technical assistance on these things is really great. But we do need, what would be ideal in my world and Melanie's world is to have different orders of government prioritize youth homelessness, prioritize prevention, and fund it. And maybe be a little directive to say, you got to do this, right? That would be ideal, but may not happen. So.
I think we can hope for that. Yeah, and I think it echoes some of the challenges that came up in the panel this morning, like funding individually, but funding in a sustainable way for programs, for systems to actually be preventing
to do
youth
what
homelessness.
they need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can hope for funding in general.
We're hopeful. We remain hopeful.
In all of this work, one of the questions that I wanted to pose that came out of discussions with folks from the LiveX network was also, we can think through how we can be maybe advocating this to those in positions of power, but what are our responsibilities to young people? How can we be assuring that we're accountable to the communities that we're trying to advocate for and work alongside or work with? So yeah, what do you think about responsibility to young people in particular?
I think there is a responsibility to young people. Otherwise, we will be developing things that aren't helpful, right? So youth voice, young people with lived experience, but also different, like thinking intersectionally, you know, that young people face discrimination for all kinds of reasons, but it could be because, you know, we're seeing a rise. I was going to say south of the border, but it's in Canada too, right? Around, you know, anti-woke. I don't even know what they mean by that. You know, but it's permission giving to racial discrimination, to homophobia and transphobia. And for us in Canada, we're fooling ourselves if we think that's not really possible here. And so, to get back to your question, I think, you know, making sure we can, this is something, you know, important. We need to engage people in ways that are meaningful to them as well, right? So not just like, hey, can you sit on the board? I always say that because I find sitting on boards to be like really boring. But anyway.
I love sitting on
You like being on boards?
I'm not on any boards.
Anybody looking for a new board member, you be careful. You just signed up for like 12. And so, but yeah, meaningful participation and you know, we've tried to encourage those who are interested in research, like how, and you're an example of that, right? Like you create your own research path and it's really builds on and puts to the center people with lived experience. So I think that's pretty essential, right? Like that has to be built in. And we have to be able to integrate the thinking, integrate the critique, and to give back, right? So like if for instance, we want people to contribute to how we should think about policy around prevention. Melanie, you and I have talked about this a lot, right? Like there should be, if we're going to ask people to help us think through the policy implications of something, I think it's incumbent upon us to help people understand how policy making works.
Yeah.
Because generally, most people have no clue how policy development works. And so like that's a kind of reciprocal thing where, you know, you get people's input, but they also understand, oh, this is how policy works, which will then make their input even better because they'll know where the pressure points are and the opportunities and the challenges.
Absolutely. Well, and I think there's an idea often, especially with youth and especially with youth with lived experience of homelessness, that they couldn't possibly be interested in that, but it's information that gives power to know how systems work. And so, I think that's a really great approach to reciprocal learning. I have one last question for you, and it's one of my favorite questions to ask people recently around imagining futures that maybe aren't where we're at now, but could be where we are. And so I'm wondering, what do you think the future of youth homelessness prevention looks like in Canada, but also across our respective contexts? And also, who are you most excited to build that future with?
Oh, well, everybody in the room, right? But I think there is a change. There's a shift underneath us towards the prevention of youth homelessness. And we believe, like say all the time, like if we can address youth homelessness well through prevention, not only will we have better outcomes for young people and their families and their communities, but we'll also get at chronic homelessness. And so what's exciting and what makes this event, I think, particularly exciting is that there are people from across Canada, people from around the world who are doing this amazing work. And so we should all be learning from that. And what an opportunity to see what happens in Wales, You mentioned Washington State, there's lots to learn from. We're at a building stage now, and the other thing I think, to kind of wrap up that whole, what's going to happen is patience and a sense of urgency all at once. It's urgent because people are suffering while we're waiting to change things. But patience because, sadly, the research on research impact through, mostly from medicine, shows that, so say in terms of medicine, you develop a new procedure for nurses. Once it's tested and the evidence is in there, all that kind of thing, it can take, on average, 17 years before it's widely implemented. 17 years. You know what, I'll be in my late 40s by then. And so, so we have to have some degree of patience because change doesn't just happen when the knowledge is there. It'd be nice to say that, but it doesn't happen that way. It takes time, it takes convincing, there are all these barriers along the way. But the more we see places that have moved boldly and what they did, the more we can take that up. We have way more evidence now on how to do prevention than we ever did. And so something that people used to say, and probably still do, is I'm not sure about prevention because I don't think there's a strong evidence base, which always struck me as odd because 99% of what we do in the world of homelessness has no research evidence base. And we just keep doing it over and over. So now if anyone says to you, there's no evidence for prevention, you're wrong. Start waving your finger at them. Just the amount of evidence in this room is profound. And that's a big deal, right? So going forward, the task will be, as I said, for us is to mobilize the knowledge. So work with government, work with communities, work with different groups of people, different, and figure out how we can make this all happen. Because we know things work. And, and we've got these amazing examples. One of the things I mentioned after the land acknowledgement, about partnership, Indigenous partnership. One of the amazing things with the Making the Shift project is we learned about these prevention programs that are Indigenous designed and Indigenous led, that are amazing and beautiful and effective. And so that kind of knowledge we've got to share and get out there and support, because these are things when you look at them, you could do that in any community, right? So we need to pay mind thoughtfulness to that kind of work as well. Like really shine the light on amazing things that can teach us all, no matter who we are, different ways of thinking about the problem.
Thank you. Yeah, I love that. Also, I'm sorry I said you were old. Age is arbitrary. Time is a social construct. But also, I mean, I think maybe is it accurate to say systems change can happen slowly. We should still be doing it, but we can also make a difference and impact right now in
Absolutely.
this space.
That's right.
Perfect.
Everything at once. Like,
Let's
keep
do it.
going.
Okay, well, those are all of my questions. Steve, thank you so much for chatting with me, and I'm excited to keep learning with you
Yeah,
this
and
week and
me
in
as well.
general. Thanks,
So-
Steve. Marty is like, get off.
No, stay. All right. It's always fun to listen to the teacher and the student have a conversation way after the fact. I'm sure they're more comfortable now with each other, now that you're not being graded.
Steve never graded me. He just paid me.
Probably good.
Now we're both teachers and students
Yeah.
at the same time.
That's true. So what I really like about academics is their ability to just talk regardless of how many people are listening, which is just, I feel like it's really a strong skill, and that's what actually gets us this far in the conversation. So let's give them a round of applause.
That was hilarious.
All right. So I just have a couple of housekeeping notes, and then we will not see each other until the ripe hour of 8:15 tomorrow. So we're just gonna ask for your attention for a few more minutes, and then we'll release you to the concurrent sessions to do whatever you need to do and learn whatever you need to learn. So a couple of things. If you are going to Peer 4, that is the bilingual session, you will need a headset. And those headsets are only available for Peer 4 and in Peer 4. So I just wanted to make sure that if you're headed there, you can understand everything that's happening, so that's really important. Another announcement, our Wi-Fi password was not printed correctly this morning, so if you were struggling to get online, I can tell you the new password. It is all capitals, MTS, M like Marty, T like the, and S like the shift. 2025 exclamation mark. And if you need it, it is printed at the registration desk. Last announcement. If you find a lost phone, a Samsung, in a black case, please bring it to the registration desk. So all of your needs are really right over there with our team who's been working in the background really hard. So this evening, I really want to call attention to this space. All of you who have registered, which is everyone in this room, I'm sure, will have a ticket in the back of your lanyard. This ticket is good for one beverage, non-alcoholic or alcoholic, whichever you prefer, for after we are done all of the concurrent sessions today. And that will start at 5:30 p.m. So please come back here at 5:30, not for the drinks, but for the night market, where we have amazing vendors selling really wonderful goods, and we want to support the local community. So please come back here 5:30, talk with your friends, buy some stuff, get matching sweaters, whatever it takes. We'd love to see it, and we know if you do, because tomorrow you'll show up in the matching gear. So that's at 5:30. For now, lunchtime will continue. The concurrent sessions will start at 1:30 p.m. You will still have breaks. You'll still have time to mingle. Please come back tomorrow and have a really good rest of your day. Thank you.